episode of Girl Influence Power is brought to you by KOLLECTIN. Shop or run the world's tiniest boutiques with KOLLECTIN.
Welcome to Girl Influence Power Podcast. I'm your host, Nadia Lee, entrepreneur, jewelry designer, CEO, co-founder of KOLLECTIN, an app that lets you shop influencer and designer labels direct from the source. Thank you for tuning in live on Castbox. This episode is brought to you by KOLLECTIN. Shop the world's tiniest boutiques in partnership with Castbox. For those tuning into our podcast for the first time, this is Girl Influence Power. It's a podcast dedicated to interviewing influential women, whether she's an entrepreneur, an influencer, or a public figure, to explore the common thread that binds us together and makes us successful as influencers. So today, my guest is Abigail Hing Wen, the smart and beautiful Renaissance woman of many talents. Abigail, who goes also by Abby, is an author of a newly released book, Loveboat, Taipei. And that's just released like this week, right?
Tuesday. Yep.
She's also a kick-ass businesswoman and an attorney. Abby is a senior director of AI tech with Intel's Office of the CTO Artificial Intelligence Group. She's also previously worked with many Silicon Valley investors as the lead legal on startup investments. In her previous life, she's an attorney with a prestigious law firm, as well as clerked for the U.S. Court of Appeals for D.C. Circuit, and worked on tech and innovation policy for the Senate Judiciary Committee. Not only that, Abby holds a BA from Harvard, a JD from Columbia Law School, and a master's in writing from Vermont College of Fine Art. Wow, that's like a lot, even for me to recite. Well, welcome, Abby.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for
welcome to our show. You are one busy woman, so we're just going to jump right in and talk a lot about your book, your career, and just your life in general, so the audience can get to know you better. So I'm going to talk first about what's the most important piece of writing that you've done in your life, and it's not the novels I'm talking about. So do you remember what you wrote on your college application essay?
Oh, I do actually. I was not expecting that question.
This is the fun part.
Right. But it's so funny that you asked that because I wrote about tutoring a Taiwanese American immigrant girl.
Oh, really?
And I never made that connection back to the subject of my book. It was a girl. She, her name was Hanya. And, we haven't been in touch since I graduated from high school, but she was a new immigrant, I think, she was maybe like 10, 11 years old. And the parents contacted the school and asked for a tutor recommendation. I'd never tutored anyone before, but, I have an older sister, so I just did it informally. So I would meet with her like once or twice a week and just helped her with English, and I would set assignments for her and like read with her and check her math, and just everything.
Right.
And then eventually I took on her little brother too. So I wrote about how meaningful it was for me to help her parse through like the English language and and I like just being impressed with how quickly she could pick things up, and also what fun it was for me just to parse through very specific things, like what's the difference between have something and happen to have. And I still remember that I wrote about that in my college application, just like these little nuances.
Right.
So it's funny you asked that question because I'm like, well, now I wrote about Taiwan and I love words and language.
Right. And then your audience is also very young too, right?
Yeah.
So now you grew up in Ohio. So what is it like being in Ohio and being Asian American?
So I grew up with very few Asian Americans. Probably another reason why I enjoyed tutoring Hanya so much. And part of the college application, I wrote about that personal connection that I had with her. It was hard in some ways and very positive in some ways. I think Ohio, it's a Bible Belt, really great family values, very safe. Like I remember just roaming the neighborhoods with my brother and sister ourselves and playing baseball in the yard with neighbors, and all that was great. It was sometimes hard to be one of the few minorities in town, and my classmates I think were more understanding. But when you would go out to the greater communities, sometimes you get these comments about the way you look, or people make fun of you with like made up language.
Right.
And and there were definitely some hard moments. I've written about some of it. It's out there. There's a piece that School Library Journal just published on an audition that I did in high school for a play, and I was cast in a non-English speaking role. And the character was actually couldn't speak English, and made up it was a made up language. It wasn't even like really Chinese, right? So things like that I think were just, I kind of like, wow, when I look back on it, I'm like, wow, that was not cool.
But it built your character, made you stronger.
Definitely builds your character, right? Yeah.
Now, complete the sentence for me. Now, if your best friend was going to vote you for most likely to, what would they vote you for in high school?
In high school, huh? I did get some of those.
Which one did you get? I'm curious, actually.
I laugh now because at the time I was like rolling my eyes. I think it was most likely to succeed.
Oh, who would have guessed? Anyway.
Yeah, and I didn't actually think. Like I said, I didn't really take it seriously. Like, they don't really know me.
No, but I think in general, people just give off a vibe. Even I think it's not about the age. It's just that feeling that you get when you meet more and more people, and as you get older and wiser. Now that we're older and wiser, we actually have that feeling of young people too. Like sometimes we meet some young people and we just go, oh, this one's going to make it, or this one's going to go somewhere. And I think they're not wrong to vote you that. But anyway, so you've accomplished so much. So I presume you're pretty much a real persistent planner. Now, if you think back when you were young, do you say like you were the kind of person that plan ahead like a week, a semester, a month, 5 years, 10 years?
Oh, yeah. I don't think I really planned ahead that much. It was really my college roommate, Judy Hung Liang, whom I'm staying with while I'm here in Los Angeles.
Oh, nice.
She taught me how to get organized. Like we used to call her the organizational queen. Like she was always running everything at the Phillips Brooks House, which is the big student volunteer service organization on campus. And she's the one who taught me, like, you got to sit down with your course schedule and plan out like all the midterms, the finals, the papers, and like put it on your calendar, and you can see if like which ones are overlapping and clashing into each other, and you might have to drop a class if there's too many that are lined up. And I was like, I'd never thought about my schedule that way. I was like, she's thinking all the way to the end of the semester.
Oh, wow.
So I definitely didn't grow up that way. I was more like, seat in my pants, like just kind of doing what was in the moment.
Oh, nice.
And I think she kind of shaped me up.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nice. That's a good friend, really.
Yeah, I've been staying with her here, and when I went back last night afternoon, I'm like, oh, I feel home.
Oh, that's nice. Now, was law a personal choice, or was it something that was expected of you? Being Asian and everything, how parents love for us to be doctors, lawyers.
So I think it started off personal. Like I did a unit in middle school where I played a judge for a day, and that was really fun, and I enjoyed like digging into the cases and the issues. I don't even remember what they were. It's probably about juvenile justice.
Oh, okay.
I remember that was one of the topics. So I thought at that point that, oh yeah, I could be a judge. So I actually went to college thinking I was going to be a judge.
Oh, okay.
But I think along the way, I was thinking about politics too.
Right.
And then there came a point I'm like, no, this is not for me. Like big law firm was not for me.
Right.
And I did step away from it then. But, I think it was one of those things, you have a bunch of ideas as a kid of what you want to be when you grow up.
Right.
And your parents will reinforce some and shut down other ones. And so definitely being a judge is something that they were high on. And I think at one point I suggested being a farmer's wife and a painter, and they were less excited about those.
That's funny because, we actually have the same major, international relations.
Oh, okay.
And I actually wanted to be a diplomat too and work at the UN.
Yeah.
But anyway, that mine experience opposite from you. I'm like, oh, it's not going to happen to me. It's not my kind of thing. And I just totally fell in love with business because I was so good at selling stuff. Anyway, so what took you away from being in law and then going into corporate, on the corporate side, and then moving all the way from, being in Ohio all the way to the West Coast? So my legal journey has been, very diverse also.
So I loved law school, and people said that I would. Like, it's really a fun place where you really just learn how to think like a lawyer.
Right.
And really academically stimulating. And people would say, like, practice of law is far less academic.
Right.
And I think that's what I found. So I left. I did a clerkship for a year, which is a fantastic opportunity and experience, like a year of public service, working with a judge.
Right.
I learned to write from her because she would write, opinion 1, and I would write on top of her version 2, and she'd do version 3 on top of me. And that's how I write even today with my novels.
Okay.
And of course, having her edit all my writing like intensely for a year was incredibly
That's true. That's
incredibly
like
formative.
Personal mentoring.
Yes. So, and then after that, I went to a law firm and I practiced in transactional law. And then I had my 3 years off with my kids that I mentioned earlier.
Right.
And then I went back into transactional and eventually went in-house to do venture capital law. So I've actually been practicing law for most of this time.
Right.
Until May of this year, because the book deal was like, it was going crazy in a good way. I had no more capacity at work to do 3 jobs. And so I let go of 2 of them. And those were the legal jobs. And I kept the business, artificial intelligence, thought leadership work.
Yeah, that's nice. Now, is it different working with, because there's so much perception of working in Silicon Valley and being the very few women that there is in the Valley. What would you say to that? What's your experience like working in Silicon Valley?
Oh, wow, you're asking really hard personal questions.
Well, different questions.
I love them. No, thank you. Really appreciate this one too. So I used to joke that I work with 30 guys a day, which is pretty much true.
Oh, really?
And I worked with like really great guys. Like actually one of them, Carrie Lai, also went on Loveboat. We didn't actually, I don't know if we realized this until later, but he gave me one of the ideas that's in my book around stick fighting. And he helped to throw a launch party for me recently in San Francisco. So he's a venture capitalist, loved working with him. And then I work with a number of like other really awesome VCs. And quite a few of them all came to my launch party. And at Kappa, was just fun. And then I work with some really fantastic people in a startup that we acquired 3 years ago. And that's, it's an artificial intelligence accelerator startup. And my team is fabulous. They're brilliant, really funny, and that's why I'm still there, because I just love working with them. But yeah, those are like the really awesome guys that are like how the world should be. I think they look at me and like, of course I'm one of them. Like of course I should be leading projects and running the deals. And they've been super supportive and awesome. And then there have been some hard times as a woman, as one of the few women. Like I think it was one of those moments. So Barack Obama talks about the rude awakening that an African-American child can have when they discover there's racism in the world. And I felt like even though I went to Harvard and I came out thinking, I'd been trained as a leader. I thought of myself as a leader. My friends and I thought of each other as leaders. To come out and like when it was time to move into leadership, I would run into people who were like, you want to lead people? Like, you mean projects, right? And and it was like, it was a weird that was my rude awakening. Like, oh, this whole time I thought I was a leader, and this whole time they didn't think I was a leader, right? Obviously, so I ended up gravitating to the people who did see my leadership skills, and those were the ones who actually, one of them had gone to Harvard, 6 years before me. So I think they were just more used to working with people like women like me. But there was definitely a group of guys that it was much harder. I for a long time I actually tried to, I think I just kind of internalized it, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not a leader, and maybe I'm doing things wrong, and maybe it's just harder in the working world than it was in school. And but when other people started tapping me for projects, that's when things started to change. And then speaking with my other girlfriends around the country who are wrestling with some of the things at the same time in their careers, it was easier for us to see it in each other. Like, wait, no, you should actually be promoted. You should be moving into leadership. We know you're much better than what. So that was actually, this has really all just happened the past year and a half.
Yeah. I know, like, people talk about there's a very strong Harvard connection between Harvard grads. Do you feel that?
Yes.
Talk about that. I'm so curious.
No, I'm just really grateful, like, for my Harvard friends that have been so supportive of this book. Harvard changed my life. My parents immigrated from the Philippines and Indonesia, and I grew up in Ohio. And, when I went to Harvard, I was completely unprepared. I just did not know. I was like, am I supposed to be here? But my friends, like, just have been really supportive. And like I said, my college roommate, and like we've other friends who've just been helping to get the word out. And I think really just been an emotional support network through the years.
Okay. And I know you are now in the tech business and you deal a lot with AI. Now, how did you even get into, like, how do you know so much about AI and like going from law to tech? Was that a huge learning curve?
Yeah, and it is still a big learning curve. And even the people who are really technical in my field will tell you they're constantly on the steep learning curve too, because the AI space is moving so fast. So a lot of it was I was working as a venture capitalist lawyer, and so I would see all the new technologies
Right.
coming through with the companies, and you're just trying to pay attention and understand like what is this, what are these companies producing. I would say my understanding is more, I am like a lawyer coming into the
Right.
space and. Like I read books on machine learning and artificial intelligence. I don't program,
Right.
but I like understand, I think, things at a conceptual level. And then of course I'm really familiar with the technologies and like where
okay.
the directions that they're moving in.
So you see it more from a third party point of view, looking from out inwards, right?
Right.
Okay.
So I think, my areas that I'm kind of focused on are like AI and bias and like what are the new breakthroughs in AI? Like I'm really interested in what Google DeepMind and OpenAI are doing as they're trying to reach artificial general
Right.
intelligence and, what are the steps to get there?
Okay. So what kind of camp are you with in terms of AI? You know how there's always this two camp, like AI is going to destroy humanity or AI is going to improve humanity, which, I mean, what's your
Oh, I'm
take
absolutely. I'm working in the field. I'm a believer. I think there are some valid concerns about AI
Right.
going out of control, and I think there's some really smart people devoted to trying to address that. So that that gives me a lot of comfort. I do think it's a revolutionary technology. It's already shaping the way we do
Right.
things. It's going to make our lives much more efficient. It can also be dangerous in the sense of perpetuating biases that are in the data.
Okay.
So there have been some headlines about hiring algorithms that
right.
are weighted against women because historically women have not received jobs in leadership.
Right.
And so, a woman's college could be negatively correlated with salary,
Right.
but not because, and it's hard to fix those
Right.
things,
Right.
right?
Because the data is there.
data's
and they're
there.
just studying from the data and learning from what they
Yes.
can pull from the data.
Right. So some of the work that I'm doing, so I'm one of the co-chairs for the expert committee on fairness, transparency, and accountability for the partnership on AI. And this is
okay.
some of the work that they're doing. They're doing a lot of thinking around the policy space and
Right.
how do we put safeguards in place.
Right.
Even at the very beginning levels, like it really needs to happen from the ground up. Technology and policy need to be working closely together. And I'm not actually seeing enough of that in our country
okay.
right now. There's not a lot of understanding of AI in the policy space, or what I'm seeing is like policymakers that are making policy, but not actually close to the technology. And we need to have more of that.
Right, right, right. Now, as a mother, how do you prepare for your kids to be in a world dominated by AI in the future?
So both my kids are actually really interested in AI. So they're both programmers. Their technical skills are
okay.
far beyond me. They're beyond my husband too. Like they're really good. So I think they're going to be more prepared than I am.
Okay, so you're not worried.
They're explaining everything to me. So
All right. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
Now you can try before you buy on KOLLECTIN. Introducing Experience, the new way to shop jewelry. Flaunt your style and express your creativity with experience. Get it today, only on KOLLECTIN.
Welcome to Girl Influence Power. We're back with Abigail. All right, so we're going to talk about your book, Loveboat Taipei. That's just recently released, like this week. So let me start off by talking about your book. We both have children, and I know this generation parents are much more intense in regards to our children's education. So is that something you feel, with your kids as well? And also being in the Bay Area, it's very intensive, I hear.
yes.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, the Bay Area is very intensive. My pediatrician actually told us people to move away for high school because
Really?
it's so stressful and competitive. I think I read an article somewhere that it's like the most competitive place to get into college out of. So yes, definitely. Interesting that I had not heard that it's a more intensive time across the board for everybody. But it's possible. Like definitely college applications are up and I think more and more jobs require higher education, so that could be part of it too.
Oh, okay. You're practically a poster child for an Asian tiger mom. Harvard grad, Columbia Law. Now, looking back, how important is education in shaping your life? And do you think you could have accomplished what you've accomplished without the education?
So as I mentioned, I think for me, coming as an immigrant, a child of immigrants, my mom from the Philippines, my dad from Indonesia, like I needed Harvard. Like it changed my life. It completely
It put
revolutionized
you
my
in a
life.
different
Place
in the map?
I remember my dad said to my mom when I got in, he's like, she's going to be exposed to things we can't even imagine. Actually makes me want to cry. Because really, like as an immigrant, like, you know, and this is before the internet where you could actually find stuff out online. Like we didn't have access to so much information.
Right.
And, you know, even at Harvard, I still didn't know so many things. Like I didn't know, did grades matter? For a really, like even until I graduated, I still wasn't sure, do grades matter? Because I'm like, now that I'm in college, like, and it turns out the answer, in case anyone else, you know, is the same shoes, is it depends on what you want to do, right? If you want to go to certain grad schools, like law school grades do matter, med school matters, business school matters less because they want to see work experience and leadership.
Right.
You know, so there's so many things I just didn't know that Harvard gave me, you know, and like through the faculty, but mostly through my classmates and just how much I learned from them and being exposed to kids from all over the world.
Right.
Who were performing and at such a high caliber.
Right. So no, it's great to hear because I think a lot of kids nowadays being exposed to social media, they feel like school is not important. That social media or being more influential is, but that's not necessarily the case. And that's really hard to impress upon, you know, young adults nowadays because they think they can pick up their camera or their phone and then be an influencer and be super rich.
They can though. That's the thing. They can.
But it's just as hard being an influencer as being successful in any career.
Right. But I mean, to your question, like, is it important today? Like, I think it's less important now. At least, you know, I take it back. I think there's probably kids like me who it is important for.
Right.
Because they need that. And I have another friend from small town Texas. Nobody, like, you know, she loved growing up there in some ways and hated it in other ways. And she does say that going to Stanford changed her life, right? But I think, you know, we look at our kids, and like they have so much access now to information through the internet, social media, their friend groups. I think that's just a big leveler of the playing field.
Okay. And your artistic side is obviously very important to you. So, you know, like when did you first start to write and how did that come about, being from law?
Right. So I've always been a storyteller. I used to tell my brother and sister stories when we were little, and I, you know, continue that even with when my kids were born. And I've been keeping a journal since I was 9. So I've always written. It's been a part of who I am, and it still is. This is people ask me like how you kept going, you know, through 12 years of rejection of my writing, and part of it is I just love to write. Like I would continue to write regardless.
It's just something you love.
It's something I love. It grounds me. It settles me. It's a way for me to work out what I'm thinking about, and what I'm feeling.
So like therapy to you, basically.
Yeah, but I started seriously writing fiction when I was pregnant with my second child, 12 years ago.
Okay.
And I wrote a first novel and kind of was hooked after that.
Right. So you're a pretty prolific writer, despite your crazy schedule. This is like the 5th book you wrote.
Yep.
So what were the other books about, or generally about?
Yeah, so the first one is a middle grade fantasy called Foxstone. I hope that I'll resurrect it one day. The second is a book about the Uyghurs of China. I'd spent 6 weeks there out of college and just, you know, wrote a story set in that world. The third was a story set in Silicon Valley, and then the fourth is an artificial intelligence virtual reality book.
Oh, wow.
And then this Loveboat was the 5th one. And then I have another one that's in the works, but, you know, and I have a bunch of other little pieces here and there that I don't know if they'll turn into novels or not.
Okay, nice. Now, we're of the same generation. I don't want to date ourselves, but, you know, when I was a teenager, I really wanted to go to Loveboat because I'm from Taiwan, and I hear so many of my friends, they go to Loveboat every summer, and I'm like, hey.
Do they? Huh.
Yeah, they do, and I've always wanted to go, but my dad won't let me. But anyway, so your latest novel, Loveboat Taipei, for the Asian American listeners, we kind of know the insider story about the significance of that. But for those out there that are not from this Chinese culture or from Taiwan, now can you explain to me, like the audience, what it's about?
Sure. So it's actually a real program. It's a program set in Taiwan, and it's been around since the 1960s.
Oh.
Asian American parents would send their kids there to learn language and culture and also potentially to find a spouse. So hence the nickname Loveboat. And so the book itself, I went on Loveboat as a presidential scholar, and the Taiwanese government went through the list of all the major scholarships. So presidential scholars, Koch scholars, Westinghouse scholars, everyone with a Chinese last name got this trip for free. So that's why I went. I showed up thinking language culture, and then it turns out to be this crazy party, as you know. The kids go crazy. Yeah, it's like a bunch of kids that have been studying hard their whole lives. Suddenly they're set loose in a foreign country. And they party like the pitch from HarperCollins, like went on Loveboat, party like the prodigies do. So snake blood sake, sneaking out of campus, glamour shots. Like it was crazy. It was fun and very formative.
We should talk about the clubbing culture.
The clubbing culture, yes.
Do you have any, like, what? So I know you talked about a little bit about the clubbing, right, in Taiwan. Share with us.
Oh, yes.
Share with the audience the clubbing culture.
My main character is a dancer, right? It was funny because I was thinking about, like, who's going to go on Loveboat? Like, who should be my main character for this journey? And I talked a little bit about the emotional journey of a character who doesn't know her culture going on Loveboat, because then she does reconnect with her culture, but also discovering her identity and all its facets. And then, of course, like the clubbing scenes, I'm like, oh, she's got to be a dancer. And so when she goes clubbing, she's just like in her element.
Right.
And I'm also a dancer, so it's
that takes
kind of drawing
inspiration from you.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what is one thing you want the readers to draw from your book, or what one takeaway? Or is there any takeaway, or is it just something fun?
So one of the things that we talked about in my MFA program, one of the things I learned from Martine Levitt is the reader really completes the story with their own experiences.
Right.
And that active engagement is what makes the story what it is. So I think every reader will take something different away depending on like what background they come from. I'm definitely hearing from readers now who are resonating with different points. And that's exciting. So some resonating with like Sophie's journey, like coming from a family that expects her to get married.
Right.
So others are resonating with Ever's journey of trying to choose between her passions and what her parents expect of her. And I think, but the big takeaway is more of like a sense of like freedom and hope that, we can really be who we are.
Right.
And be ourselves in all senses of the word, all facets of it.
Right. Because, I think also the Asian culture doesn't really emphasize the importance of being, the artistic part of being who you are. We always focus on the academic more. So I think that's really important to see a different side of all the different kinds of Asians that we can be.
Right. That's actually another big point is the diversity among Asian Americans.
Right.
There's a cast of 30 different characters in the book, and they're all different.
Right. So now, how do you compare Loveboat Taipei with Crazy Rich Asians? I have to ask that.
Yeah, no, I love Crazy Rich Asians. I think it's a great story. It's a great movie. I don't think they can be compared. I mean, this one, it's been pitched as a young adult, Crazy Rich Asians. That one is a girl going to Singapore, and getting inspected by the family as a potential future spouse. And so, I think what I'm taking away from these conversations about Asian American art is there's so many stories in the community, and they all need to be shared, right? And that's the hope. I think the hope is just people continue to write their stories and share them out in the world, and over time, like they don't become Asian American stories; they're just stories, for everybody.
Right. So now, what's Taipei like for you? Because I'm Taiwanese. I want to hear from someone who goes to Taipei for the first time, especially on a Loveboat journey. Like, what does that feel like for you being in Taipei?
I had such a great time. I think in some ways Taipei is very, very authentically Chinese in like the sense, like, so a lot of the treasures in the National Palace Museum, like they have an amazing collection, and there's a lot of temples that are still around.
Oh, right.
Whereas I don't think you see quite as much of that in mainland China.
Right.
So in some ways, like it's like a little bit of like a slice of time of an older China.
That's true. No, yeah, it makes sense because a lot of that religion was, obliterated.
Exactly.
And Taiwan mixes a lot of the religions, like Taoism, Buddhism. It's like their own unique form of what they call Buddhism, but it's really kind of also idol worshipping too in some way.
Yeah, you see a lot of the pagodas poking through the green trees.
Yeah, right. So it's a very unique Taiwan form of religion,
and it's also very modern. City or Taipei is a modern city, And, when I was there 2 years ago, they talked about how they've eliminated poverty on the whole island. So I think, very progressive in a lot of ways, which is cool.
And it feels very warm to me. I mean, I'm Taiwanese, so I'm going to say it feels very warm to me, but I've not been there since, I was very young. I left when I was first grade. So, but it always feels like home. Like, I feel like people are warm there, even though you don't really know them, but I feel like, people are generally more open and more willing to help than is sometimes when I go to China. But anyway, so what? How did the Loveboat impact you personally in your own life? Or did it?
It did. It absolutely did. Yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about this as I was writing the book, and then even afterwards. I would say the two big ones are just healing in my identity. Coming out of Ohio, I wasn't very comfortable being Asian American. I just wanted to blend in as much as possible. But going on a Loveboat, I'm like meeting Asian Americans who are excited about their culture and learning about the culture myself and making it my own. Like, I feel like, okay, I was able to integrate those parts of myself into someone who's stronger for it. And I see that when I meet these Loveboat alumni now. They're amazing. And I think they're also similarly healed and confident in who they are. The second piece I only came to recently, and that's the rebellion. So we did rebel. We were sneaking out. We were like, thumbing our noses at counselors, like completely rude teenagers. But I think that was good for us because our culture doesn't really celebrate rebellion. Like it's really more, like at least, at the time we were growing up, it's more about obedience and submission to authorities, elders, reverence for elders. And all that is actually good. Yeah. But I think I had friends who were moving through the workforce who were unable to challenge authority. They, so for example, they're defending their dissertation in college, and they wanted to meet the professors halfway. And the professor didn't want them to meet them halfway. They're like, no, you need to defend your thesis and like stand up for what you believe. And they had a really hard time doing that because they had been raised in a culture that did not want challenge to authority. And so I think that experience of rebelling in a safe environment has made us better leaders, more willing to be disruptors, which is what we look for in Silicon Valley and, in startup company leaders.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because we're trained to be not the nail that sticks out.
Exactly.
Right? And not to boast about ourselves, or our parents at least keep telling us, like, you could be really good, but just don't boast about yourself and don't sell yourself like, like showing off. It's about showing off. But I think it really is a good time for you to be able to balance the two and kind of discover yourself. Would you enroll your own kids in Loveboat?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot. And, now that they've been properly warned, maybe it's okay. They can go in, eyes wide open. It's a smaller program now focused on the tour around the island. And I think that would actually be a really fun experience.
Yeah, I was wondering if they still have it.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's smaller. But, maybe it'd be fun for me to go with my kids to Taiwan. So maybe we'll do that instead.
No, actually, that's actually a good idea, because I actually have a lot of friends who bring their kids back, now being, I think, third generation, even more removed, to experience what it's like to be, locally immersed in the food.
It's a really valuable experience. I just went to Fujian province with my mom for the first time in June, and I am three generations removed from that place. But it was really amazing. Like, I went to the village where my family's from, and there are people there who are related to me.
Oh,
like,
wow.
A lot of people who are related to me, like distantly. And then my grandparents and granduncles' names were on certain buildings, and that was just so surreal to feel that sense of roots and heritage. Legacy. And I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner?
Yeah, that's true. That's
really special.
Nice. No, I agree. Because I was recently back, and it was kind of nice to hear that you're just walking around the neighborhood. Even, there's so many people now in Taiwan, but people still remember, like, say, my father and, like my family. And because they still keep it very close in some way, even in a very kind of this new society where they're just, so much removed with the technology and social media. But anyway, so what is in the horizon for you, and will we see your characters grow up?
Wow, great question. So I am working on a sequel. This book is a standalone, but there's a companion novel in the works that follows like actually, I don't know how many characters yet, like at least two of the key ones that people wanted to know what happened to afterwards. But I like that idea of maybe seeing them grow up at some point. We'll see.
All right. Okay. Well, anyway, if you have more questions for Abby, you can always, text us, email us. You can reach Abby on social media. But anyway, thank you first for coming on our show today and sharing your amazing stories. So you're quite an inspiration for women, especially pursuing writing, career in tech and law. But anyway, for all of you who haven't followed Abigail Wen, you need to do it now. She's an amazing woman of influence who has a lot of great stories to share with you. You can follow Abigail on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and also on your website, abigailhingwen.com. And don't forget to buy her newly released book, Loveboat Taipei. You can find that in Amazon, right? Barnes and Nobles, pretty much on everywhere you can buy
Target,
it.
Costco, and
Walmart.
local Walmart and local independent bookstores.
Right, and the book has rave reviews. Right now, it's being featured in Entertainment Weekly. It's been on Barnes and Noble's Young Adult Book Club pick, 17 Magazine Top 7 Most Anticipated Book. So lots of great, great news about your book. So if you enjoy our podcast today, also subscribe to our podcast and check our videos on our website, girlinfluencepower.com, or on Collectin's YouTube channel. And that's it for today, Abigail. Thank you for coming on our show and tuning in live.
Thank you.